Today I'd like to give some impressions on the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters because I've had a lot of requests to do so. But before I do that, there's a lot of indie titles I want to introduce you guys to because I have a lot of friends that are making really great stuff, and I think you should be aware of it. Some of you may be familiar with the indie studio Something Classic. They developed a game called Shadows of Adam that released a few years back. That was met, for the most part, at least with people that I interact with here in kind of the RPG community online. It was met with a lot of praise. It was mostly positive kind of feelings and reviews on that game. And I played it a little bit as well and did a stream on it and had Tyler Meyer, who's the composer and producer there at Something Classic. He came onto our podcast and talked to us about it. I've also had Tim Wendorf, who does the pixel art, came onto my podcast once and talked to us about what makes pixel art endearing. I really love his pixel art style and his animation. It's really fantastic. They also released Pillars of Dust, which is another kind of like 8-bit style RPG. But right now they have a Kickstarter that's live for their new game, which is Quartet. And this is more in line with that SNES 16-bit style RPG, kind of like Shadows of Adam. It's kind of the next step in that style of game that they did with that. Involved in this project is Patrick Holloman, who I've also worked with a number of times on the channel in the past. We did a Xenogears analysis video together. We did a Final Fantasy analysis video together. And I've had him on the podcast a couple times as well. So he's the one kind of writing and directing the story on this one. And then, of course, Tyler Myers doing the music. He's a producer on the game. And then Tim Wendorf is back for the animation and the pixel art. So it's very much kind of in line, or maybe like the next evolution of the Shadows of Adam style. And this one is shaping up to be really promising. It looks like they've got something pretty special they're putting together here. And the greatest part about it is you don't have to take my word for it on that. You can go to the Kickstarter page, link will be in the description, and you can download a demo right now and play it. It will take you, depending on how quickly you go through it, anywhere from about half an hour to an hour to play through the demo. And I thought it was really, really great. It's again, the style is charming. It's got great pixel art and animation. It's got wonderful music. And the writing is charming, and it's witty, and it's fun. And the battle system is really pretty polished. I really like what they've done with it. They've built in a way for you to gain your magic points. I think it's called ability points in this one, so AP, back by doing standard attacks, by defending. And so there are ways to get the resources back to cast magic without using restorative items necessarily. But restorative items are also plentiful in these dungeons. And so they really encourage you to use your abilities. And that makes the combat really dynamic, at least that I found. I found that, going through and really reading the descriptions on every ability and mixing what this character can do with what this character can do, there's a lot of promise here. I'm more engaged in the combat in this game than I am in a lot of other, JRPGs, where a lot of times you just kind of hit an attack on every round, right? Another thing I really like about it is that you can party swap in the middle of battle. I always like it when you have battle systems that allow you to do that. So you start off with your parties separate. You have 4 characters kind of going through here, or I think it's at a different time period. They're going through the same dungeon, but at a different time period. So one set of characters go through, then a second set of characters go through. There's actually some really good, multi-party problem solving, puzzle solving in the dungeon, maybe a little bit FF6 style, which I really like. You can tell that this game is inspired by FF6 for sure. You can definitely see those inspirations there. But at one point towards the end, the whole party of 8 comes together, and in the middle of battle, you can swap out individuals from one party to the other. And this can be very useful during boss fights and things like that. They also have a pretty tough optional boss fight if you want to tackle that at the end. And I had a blast with it. So their Kickstarter campaign is coming to an end on October 1st. Luckily, they've already hit their initial funding goal. So the game has been funded, so awesome. But they are hoping to hit their first stretch goal so that they can bring the game to Switch. As of right now, they would only be creating a version of the game for PC at launch. And if they can hit that first stretch goal, get to $45,000, which I think they're about $6,000 or $5,000 off of that, so they're pretty close. If they can get to that, they will promise a Switch port. And if you'd like to try it out, go to the Kickstarter campaign, download the demo, and try it for yourself, and let me know what you think. I think it's worth taking a look at. So, the next game I want to talk about is already released. It's called Cris Tales. The director of the game was kind enough to send me a Steam code for this, again through Patrick Holloman, who did some writing on this one. And unfortunately, I just didn't have the time to really sit down and give it a solid chance until today, actually. And so I wanted to talk about it a little bit. It's already out, so there are reviews out there you can go check out. There's, going to be more detailed information out there if you want to like really dig into the weeds and see if it's something you want to buy. But with my first, 2 hours with it, I was really quite impressed. Didn't really know what to expect going into it, but what I got was some really interesting ideas that I think are worth looking into. It's got this really unique graphical style that is gorgeously animated. I'm just very, very polished on that account. The music is whimsical and charming, as are all the presentation. The entire presentation on this game is just pretty exceptionally done. It goes a really long way toward making a great first impression, and I was pleasantly surprised by that. Even the voice acting is solid. It's got kind of that whimsical, light-hearted kind of like tone and feel to it, but it also does enough to keep you engaged and actually interested in where the story is going. It plants mysteries in the right places, and it does enough to make you go, hey, I'm into this. I wonder what happens next. In addition to this, it's got this really interesting idea. I've not seen anything like it before, where the main character is a time mage, and so she has these crystals with which she can see into the future and into the past, and what it creates is sort of like a triangle on the screen. It sort of divides the screen. If you go into like the middle here would be the point, and it sort of goes down into the corners like that, and in the middle is your present day time period. Over to the right side is your future, and to the left side is the past. And so as you're walking through an environment, you can see the past, present, and future of that environment, and characters will change, and the landscape will change. And there's actually a couple of quests, even early on, that involve you having to see what happens in the past, see what happens in the future, and piece together how to help people in the present to avoid a bad future or something like that. It's really cool. And this even carries over into the combat too, where she can sort of invoke the past or invoke the future to inflict certain statuses on the enemies. So here's a really great example. You can have an enemy in the present that you're fighting, and you have one of your mages, poison the enemy in the present day. And then Crispell, the main character of the game, she can send that enemy into the future where the poison has taken its effect for a long period of time, and the enemy will just be dead. So it's almost like an instant death. If you can poison the enemy and then send them into the future, it's like, boom, they're instantly dead. There was even a boss where you could have one of your characters cast water on them so that their armor and their shield in particular would be soaked. Then send them into the future, and there'd be rust on their armor so that you could break through the defense. So it does some really clever things like that with the combat system. And again, I had no idea that this was a part of this game. I had no idea what to expect going into this. And I just thought it was super clever. I thought these were some really interesting and unique ideas that I had not seen before in a turn-based RPG like this. Presentation is top-notch, and I really think it's worth looking into. The only thing, and I've seen this as kind of a common criticism of the game, the only thing that I saw that I think is even worth bringing up on that account is that there are a lot of loading times. I had the game installed on a solid-state drive, so it really wasn't too bad. But even like before and after every battle that you fight, you'll have to wait through a loading time. Usually these are masked in RPGs like this with some kind of screen transition, the screen sort of like melts away or breaks or shatters or something like that, or sort of spins in toward the center. And this doesn't have that. It just kind of goes to a white screen with a loading screen. And I'm not sure what it is about that, but I do agree that can feel a little tedious. So, keep that in mind. If you can install the game on a solid-state drive to reduce those load times, that might be a good thing to do. But aside from that, I really thought the game was super solid, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So it's a game that I wanted to talk about a little bit, just make you aware of. The next game that I want to talk to you about is one that you can also play a demo for. It's called Shrines Legacy. And there's a beta demo for it on their website. I've put that website in the description. All the links to all of these games I'm talking about will be in the description, whether it's to the Steam page or their Kickstarter or, their own homepage or whatever it is. Shrines Legacy is going to have a Kickstarter going live soon here in the next couple weeks. So I want to put this out there now to make you aware of it. Go on to Kickstarter and you can wish list it or whatever if you want to do that now. But you can play a demo for this too, which I definitely suggest. This one is a co-op action RPG in a similar vein to something like Secret of Mana or Seiken Densetsu 3, but also with huge influences from Terranigma. And Terranigma is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. You'll notice some of the moves that the characters can do are Terranigma inspired. And so it's a game kind of in that mold, which is one of my favorite genres that there is. And it's very charming as well. There's something about these co-op games. They're so far and few between. I don't know why after Secret of Mana and Seiken Densetsu 3, we didn't see a lot more couch co-op action RPGs like this. They are a blast. Some of my favorite gaming memories of my life were playing those games with my buddy Parker. Okay, and lastly, I have a friend who's he's the solo developer on this next game, which is called The Valley of Death. I've provided a link here to the Steam page. This is releasing on October 8th. And this game is not an RPG, but it is still something that looks really fun to me. It's more of a hack and slash twin stick shooter. And you play as basically two characters simultaneously. He just calls them red and blue. So you have a guy with kind of a blue hair and a blue beard and this guy with red hair. And you kind of fight your way through different levels, challenging levels, as they're working their way to the Valley of Death. My buddy who's making this game has been working on it for a really long time. He's really put a lot of effort, a lot of work into it, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I think he's a really talented dude, and if you're into this kind of style of game, I would definitely check it out, definitely look into it. Originally, I was supposed to help him write some music for this game. I've actually had 3 different projects which I've been offered opportunities to write music for. And it's something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to write a game soundtrack. And 3 times now I've been asked, 3 times I semi-agreed, and 3 times I had to unfortunately tell him I just don't have the time right now. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe that another RPG channel out there, some of you guys are probably aware of this one as well, Thor High Heels, I believe he commissioned him to do the music. If I'm wrong on that, I'm going to cut this out of the video. If I'm right about that, then get excited, because he's a talented dude. So I believe that Thor High Heels did the music for this game. So something cool to look into if you're into that genre, if you're into that twin stick, shooter genre. I really believe in the talent of my buddy who made the game, and I think he's going to make something that'll be a lot of fun to play. So, go check out the Steam page if you're interested. Okay, so that gets us through all the indie titles that I've been looking at, that I wanted to make you guys aware of. And now I want to talk a little bit about the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, because I've got a lot of questions about this. So originally, I was going to try to wait to talk about this until all 6 of them were out. As of right now, only Final Fantasies 1 through 4 are available. And I was like, 5 and 6 should follow up pretty quickly, the way that 4 did. 4 pretty quickly followed up 1 through 3. And I was thinking, we'd get some news on 5 or 6 releasing pretty quick, but I actually have no idea. They're supposed to come out by the end of 2021. There's only a couple months left in 2021, but we'll see what happens. In any case, regardless of what ends up happening with those, I think we have a pretty good sense of what to expect based on the first 4 releases. And the TLDR on this is that I am having a blast playing through these games. The caveat to that is the reason why is because I've modded them. There's this really great, passionate, talented modding community that has arisen around these Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. And because of their hard work, because of the talented people there, making tweaks to the game, I have really enjoyed playing these 4 Final Fantasy games. Of course, I mean, I have reviews on the channel. I'm going to release new versions of those reviews pretty soon. So my feelings about the game are already pretty well known. I think they're great. All 4 of them that are out now, 5 and 6, it's no different. The first 6 Final Fantasy games are really, really phenomenal games that I love and replay over and over again. So do I suggest buying them and playing them? Sure. But the caveat is get the Steam version, get the PC version, and get involved in this modding community and tailor the game to your preferences, because that has made the experience one where it's like I basically have my ideal versions of Final Fantasy 1 through 4 right now. By the way, that link to the modding, it's actually a Discord server. I've put an invite to that Discord server in the link in the description. So you can go there and you can take a look at what they have on offer and download them and try them out. There's instructions there on how to install the mods and everything like that. It's not that complicated. It's pretty easy. If you were just going to buy the games as they are, say on the Android or iOS version, I don't know if mods are available on there. I don't really get into mobile gaming much. Maybe there is a way to do that. But if your plan is to just purchase the game and play it as it comes, I wouldn't do that personally. I don't think there's just too many little things about them that bother me as they stand, where if I could not tweak them or change them, I wouldn't want to play the game that way. And a lot of people are waiting for console versions. They're like, oh, I want to play this on Switch or want to play this on PS4 or whatever it might be. If without a way to mod them, I would not play them personally. Because there's a lot of really cool things that you can do that for me are just the right just the right tweaks to make it like my ideal version of these games. It's actually, for the first time in my life, something that inspired me to maybe get into modding myself. I've actually downloaded the tools to extract assets and edit them and work on them. Luckily for me, every time I decided I was going to do that, somebody else already did the work that I was going to do and saved me a ton of time. So a couple of things in particular. First of all, one thing that I really didn't like about the hero sprites. So all of the enemy sprites and backgrounds and things like that, for the most part, are fine to me. They look really great. But the hero sprites in battle they look very flat to me. They don't have highlights and shading. They don't look very dynamic. They look very flat in comparison to the enemy sprites that have tons of great highlighting and shading going on in them and give them this very dynamic look to them. The hero sprites look very flat. And that was one thing that really bothered me, and it bothered me the most in the first game, in Final Fantasy 1. And so I decided to extract those sprites, to download the tools to start, modding, and tried my hand at adding a little shading and highlighting to some of the characters. And I got started on that project, and I realized how long that was going to take, and I was like, I really want to, but I don't know if I can do this. And then lo and behold, there was somebody in that Discord server who went ahead and did that for me, and it looks even way better than what I was doing. But even just that little bit of added shading just like really makes the characters blend better with the rest of the art assets in the game. And so Final Fantasy 1 is actually the one I've spent the most time in. I'm probably halfway or a little more than halfway through that game right now. Followed by Final Fantasy 4, which I've put maybe about 3.5 hours into. And I've only really done the intros of Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 3. But they're all great games. I know what to expect. But again, let me just give you some examples of some of the things that you can do here. One thing that really bugged me is the mini-maps. They have these mini-maps in the game that, functionally they're fine, but I think from an art perspective, they really clash. They don't look like they belong with the game's art, if that makes sense. And at any time, you can press the square button if you have a PlayStation controller, or the X button on an Xbox controller, and you can kind of bring up a map anyways. And so I wanted to get rid of that mini map. I just felt like it really clashed with the style of the rest of the game. So they have a mod where you can take those mini maps off, and that was really big for me. It really helped, because I think you can press like select or something like that to take the map off, but then every time you walk into a new screen, whether it's inside of a building or into a new town or back out to the overworld, it always comes back up again. So I'd have to constantly be like taking off the map, and then it would come back on and taking off, putting back. It was really annoying. And so they have a map or a mod out there to take that off. I also really didn't like that they have this icon up in like the top left corner of the screen. It looks like it's a fast forward symbol, but it's not a fast forward feature. I really wish the game had a fast forward feature, kind of like the releases of the PlayStation Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9. They have this fast forward feature, right? I really wish these games had a fast forward feature like that, but that's not what that is. That is an auto battle icon, and it's always on the screen even if you're not using auto battle. So they have a mod now where they can do subtle auto battle, which is where when you have auto battle engaged, when it is actually auto battling, a symbol will come up on the screen. But when you're not auto battling, it goes away. Lots of little things like that where it's just like presentationally, it just look wrong. It's just like, I don't like this little element. And you can really do away with any of those things and tailor it to be exactly how you want. Another big complaint from a lot of people is the font was terrible. This is commonplace in a Square Enix releases these days. And I think a lot of this has to do with fonts that they have to use for the mobile versions, for Android and iOS. I don't know why they couldn't change that for the Steam release, but the font is pretty bad. But this is a really easy fix, and they have tons of fonts you can choose from. I tried a Chrono Trigger font, Final Fantasy VI font, a Dragon Quest XI font. There's all kinds of different font choices and releases that they have on the Discord that you can try out for yourself. And yeah, so it's not even really an issue. It's something that's one of the easiest things to fix, really. But I mean, there's a lot more than that. You can customize the UI. In several different ways. You can change the shade of blue, as the background on the windows. You can change it into, this is a really nice looking one here that I have on the screen where they got kind of a transparency on it. Just looks really slick and really nice. Tom W., who is actually a mod on my Discord server and a viewer of the channel, he's put out mods for all the games released so far where you can replace the new music with the original game's music, whether it's the NES or Super NES version, or whether it's the 3D remake versions in the case of FF3 or FF4. So you can replace the music if you want to do that. But in my opinion, the new soundtracks are worth the price of admission alone. Like, the new soundtracks that have been done for these Pixel remasters are absolutely spectacular. They are phenomenal. They're so good. And of course, these new compositions, these new arrangements of the soundtracks were directed by Nobuo Uematsu himself. There were a lot of other people who worked on them, obviously, a lot of other musicians and composers who did the kind of the legwork on the arrangements themselves, but this was all overseen by Nobuo Uematsu. And I think they're just fantastic. I think they're so phenomenal. I love listening to the soundtracks. On Final Fantasy 2 and 3 in particular, I didn't play too far into them yet, but every time I got to the world map, I just had to stop and listen to the music, because the world map music on both of those games, 2 and 3 in particular, are some of my favorite pieces in the whole series, and they're just beautifully done here. But I mean, on top of this, there's just all kinds of fun stuff you can do. If you don't like the battle sprites, or even like the overworld sprites the way they are, you can replace them with the Origins version for Final Fantasy 1 and 2. You can replace them with the Record Keeper versions of these sprites. There's lots of different sprite replacements. They have backgrounds that can be replaced with the PSP versions of the game. They have color-corrected versions. They have some people that have just gone in on some of the art for the backgrounds, in particular on Final Fantasy III, and just done a beautiful job of making these amazing dynamic backgrounds for the battles. There's a lot of fun ones too, like you can replace all the characters in FF1 with Final Fantasy IX characters. There's a whole overhaul where they have the UI looks like Final Fantasy IX, and you have Zidane and Steiner and you know, all these characters from FF9 that are the characters in FF1. They have really good like CRT shader mods that replace the really poor shader that they included with the game. It's almost been more fun for me just like playing around with the mods and extracting assets and kind of taking a look at the game under the hood than actually playing the games, which are all great games. They're phenomenal. I recommend them to everybody. I think these are absolutely classic video games that every lover of RPGs should play. And I'm having a blast playing through them again in essentially a version that I am tailoring and customizing to my own tastes. On the PC version, and that has just been a blast for me. I'm having a ton of fun doing that. And so, do I recommend them? Yes. If you're going to do what I'm doing, and you're going to tailor them to your own tastes and to your own experience, and you're going to have fun kind of looking under the hood of the game, like I've been saying, this is some of the most fun I've had with Final Fantasy in forever. I'm absolutely looking forward to Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI, particularly what they're going to do with the soundtrack on Final Fantasy VI, man. With how brilliant the music has been so far, I'm dying to hear the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster soundtrack of FF6. I think I'm just very, very stoked to hear what they've done with that. And so, yeah, I would recommend doing that. If you're waiting on a console version, I'm sure that they will eventually release one. I'm certain that they will do that. And we would all hope that they would take a look at some of the best work being done by the modding community and maybe, take some notes on that and maybe improve the games a little bit. But, there's no guarantee that they will do that. They don't have the best track record right now in the world when it comes to porting things, so I wouldn't bank on it. And so my recommendation would be get yourself the PC version, the Steam version of the game, of all of them if you want to do that, and get into this modding community and check out what you can do with the game and have fun with it. I had a lot of fun turning the fighter back into a red-haired sprite, and lots of other things, lots of other experimentation. So I'm having a blast with it. I'm really enjoying it. So those are my thoughts on the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. Now, I got to get back to preparing for the Xenogears podcast and for working on the Final Fantasy retrospectives, but thought I'd put something out because it's been a little while and just let you guys know what I've been up to. There's some other things I could talk about too, but this has already been going on a long time. I have Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. I've played that a little bit. I'm really enjoying it. I liked this game quite a lot when it released, but I think the Switch version does a lot to address some of the problems that people had with the original game. So I've enjoyed this a lot. I've only played about 3 or 4 hours into it, but I'm liking it a lot. But don't have a ton of time to finish things right now because there's just so much going into the podcast with Xenogears. It takes a lot of time, and of course with the Final Fantasy retrospectives that I'm developing. So most of my time is going into that when I'm not working my full-time job. So in any case, thanks everybody. Let me know what you guys think of the Pixel Remasters and of these other indie projects I've talked about in the description. And I'll talk to you again soon. Peace out.